Well, hello there and welcome to Travels with Geordie. If this is your first visit, my name is Peter Knowles and I live on this classic wooden motor cruiser here in Victoria, British Columbia, along with the loving memory of my pup, Geordie. All the while fixing it up for some pretty ambitious cruising. If that's the sort of thing that you might find interesting, please consider sticking around and subscribing. I'd love to have you. Although we are right smack in the middle of redoing the head aboard MV Zephyrus, this last week I did manage to get up to the boat shed and get some work done on Poem. Most notably, I got the sole in, which is a huge milestone for me because at least I can walk around on a flat surface again. Plus, I now have full standing headroom. Well, all right, it's the first trip back to the shed after the holidays. I haven't been here in a little while and everything is looking just fine. I have been up several times delivering large amounts of plywood and other lumber and taking away as much of the old interior as I can each trip. But it'll be great to actually buckle back down. What are we up to? Building the sole. And of course, there's some complications. Okay, back in the bilge. Well, since the last time we were here, I have actually lowered the battery box on the starboard side an additional 3/4. Some of you will have noted that I still left a piece of 3/4 ply under there. And in fact, I removed that very same day, but I figured I'd showed you so much that day already, I would just leave that. So the battery box is now as low as it possibly can. The tray for it is sitting right on the engine beds. I have to do that to the battery box and tray on the other side because that will be the datum for the height of the new sole. And from there, I can move on. Okay. Okay. So screwing these back down using new galvanized screws. The only difference is I'm going to rub the screws on a little bit of wax so that they're a little bit lubricated so that if they ever have to come out again, they aren't quite so desperate. Of course, it makes it a lot easier to put them in too. Okay, so both battery boxes, trays have been installed and the battery boxes are back in. So as I said, this defines the height of the new sole. So I'm using this little ledger I've created here to give me an idea where that's going to be. And because of the plywood that goes on top of the structure, as long as the structure is above the battery boxes, I'm in the right ballpark. Okay, I'm going to use this structural Douglas fir to make the new ledgers. This is not bad wood. It has some imperfections in it, which we'll work around. But at first, I'm just going to take an inch off each edge, which will be the new ledgers, an inch deep by 1.5 inches tall, larger than the ones that were there before. All right, one big long rip. Holy sawdust, Batman. Because this ledger gets really close to a stringer at the forward edge, I have to cut a little bit off of here. Then the old ledger and the new ledger and the very clever spacer block that basically if I place between the two as I install the new ledger, it will be the correct distance down to bring this edge down to this edge 3.5 inches lower. Now you'll notice that this edge and this edge are actually not flat, or in other words horizontal with the world. The beams, the sole beams had been sitting on an edge. In fact, you can see one here, it was flattened out a little bit. So I will probably ease this a little more. I've used the eased edge already from the timber for this corner, but I may just take a hand plane and put a slightly broader flat on that, because of course sitting on a point, that will crush quite quickly, but as soon as it's about 1/4 to 1/2 inch wide, it will not crush anymore. And then rechuck this I have neglected to bring my screw gun. I forgot it in the city, so I'm having to use one drill for both of these. Anyway, I'm hoping I can push this right on in a single shot. We'll see how this works. Okay, all the way back. I have my brace ready to go in here. A handy dandy crowbar for the final encouragement. Now you notice I just put a stainless steel screw in here. I will not finish these with stainless steel screws. It's a lot easier to use the Robertson screws to get these set up. Okay, this is going great. Alright then, well, that hasn't been much fun, but it's done and I'm really pleased with the way it's set up. Now just to rip out the old ones. Big nails into white oak frames. Okay, now, don't give me too much trouble. Oh, piece of cake. Oh, piece of cake, love it. You know, it's amazing. Frames in this boat are in fantastic shape. I haven't seen a broken frame yet, but of course, I haven't moved further aft where it's much more likely. Turns out I'm just able to take this edge off with my power planer. Don't have a lot of clearance, but it does all I really need. Well, I made a mistake. That ledger is 1.5 inches too high. Yes, I did some sort of calculation error and I missed out on 1.5 inches. So I have corrected it over here on this side. And it really wasn't that bad. Because the old ledger is gone, I need a new witness line of a sort, and I just do that with that piece of tape. I'll show you what I mean. So if I take a piece of tape and I put it on the frame at the top of the current ledger and then remove the ledger, I can take another piece of 1.5 inch tape and put it below that, giving me a witness line to reattach the ledger. No problem. Oh, yeah. All right. And another row of tape, giving me a new mark 1.5 inches lower than the original one. And there we go. Well, and good morning. It's finally time to actually put some sole beams in here, and it's going really, really well. Let me show you my process. So I rip and cut them roughly to length outside in the shed, and then I'll do the final trimming inside here, which requires both a miter and a bit of a bevel because the hull tapers forwards a little bit. So I do this literally just by eye, not even scribing, just basically a feel. I can tell that these slopes are not pointy enough right now, and I have to start to add a bevel, which I'm going to say is, that much. And when I say that much, I mean, that much. We'll know more in a second. And the trick is to make sure you cut the bevel in the right direction. The saw overcuts. In other words, it doesn't undercut, doesn't cut towards you, it cuts away from you. So I just have to remember that as I go for the cuts. So in this case, this is the aft face of this, and so I want to overcut that. So let's just turn this around here. And a little point here. So if I take the existing angle, I back off a little bit and then add a little bit for the overcut, the bevel. Excellent. I'll do just a little trowel fit for this to see if my bevel is reasonably close. And it's pretty good. A little point here, plus some material for the overcut. There we go. Excellent. Right on the money. The next beam would technically be the forward one, that is at the bulkhead, but I don't want to do that one just yet because you'll see the ledger dies out, and in fact that one is going to have to be set even lower. Probably I'll just rip a thinner beam because it's not actually a structural beam, because it's going to be attached to the bulkhead. But because it's so close and it's going to be difficult to do, I'm going to do the aft beam next, which is the next full beam that goes across because of that. Gosh, that's a beast. Speaking of beasts and messes, I started to take apart this section of the bulkhead here because of course the step in the past from the aft cabin to the house had been a foot tall, and it's only going to be 9 inches now, so this needs to be cut down, or actually 8.5. At one point I was thinking of maybe putting a step in and it'd be 2 steps to come up, but I don't think that complexity is warranted with a step of 8.5 inches, which really isn't very much. But as I started to rip this apart, it just got so nasty. There's so many holes and missing pieces, and it's just so I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do. Shipfitter's disease is setting in a bit, or at least it was last night before I had a good night's sleep on it. This bulkhead, as all the bulkheads on the boat, is made up of one direction vertically of V-joint tongue and groove, and one direction horizontally of V-groove tongue and groove. And in some places it's probably fine, but I haven't found anywhere yet. For instance, the forward bulkhead was a complete chopped up mess and quite rotten where it had been sitting in the water for, well, many, many years. So I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do here, but I'm getting ahead of myself. What I do need to do now is put this last beam in, and that will tell me how the whole sole is going to sit. You can see by the riser on the exhaust that this beam can't go all the way across, but I am going to try to find a way to keep the 2 pieces parallel with kind of a bridge over it to support it all as I do it. It's a bit of a fiddle, but I think it's worth it. Okay, so you can see with a couple of blocks, I can now put a straight edge across the top, and I can easily see that we're not perfectly aligned. Very, very easy. All right, let's see what we can do here. Up a bit. That's looking pretty good. Let me go do the other side, make sure it's happy. Excellent. Okay. I'm gonna call it right there. Yep. Okay. Whew. That went pretty well. Ouch. Ouch, 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 ouch. All right, then let's put a straight edge across what we have so far and see how it feels. Pretty good. Oh my gosh. About a 1/16 of an inch high right here. So this ledger would have to be trimmed down just a hair. Now, when you're using a questionable straight edge, this is a very straight piece of wood, but it's good to flip it over and try it the other way. And it's pretty much the same, so that averages out quite nicely. Okay, so let's look at the other side here. Long pieces of wood in a small place. On this side we have, on this side, the middle beam is a little bit high on this side. Man, it's close though, honestly. You would barely notice this. All right, let me just touch those 2 with a chisel and see what we can do. Okay. And just a hair off over here. Let's see then. Okay. Wow, that is well within tolerance. And have I corrupted the other side here? Let's see. Absolutely perfect. Love it. Absolutely love it. Okay, now it still could be potato chipped a little bit. So what I'll do is I'll measure diagonally as much as I can, even with this big lump in the middle here, and see how that's awesome. And this way. About there anyway. There's a just the slightest, but I'm not going to worry about it. I think that is well within tolerance. Okay, so now with the bulk of the structure level, I can then start with this beam at the bulkhead here because I can project forward from the known level beams to make sure that that one is perfect, in which case, wow, all the hard stuff is done. After that, it's just connecting the dots. Okay, so I've rough cut this one. It's obviously too long. So now I can trim it so they need to be less pointy. And of course, the bevel. No, Peter, not even close. Let's take quite a bit more off than that. But I'm happy with the bevel's perfect. Okay, I'm in place. Okay, then how we do? Wow, that is awesome. And over here. Wow, okay, that is certainly good enough for me. Excellent. You'll notice that there's actually a 1/2 inch gap here because, of course, there's a bulkhead at this point, and the bulkhead sits against the frame, and this beam will sit against the bulkhead. Awesome, 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 awesome. Oh, gosh. Let's start fastening this down. There we go. Okay, so just deck screws in for now. Because all this structure I'm actually going to fasten with lag bolts. I just didn't figure out what sizes and quantities I needed, but I do now. So next week I'll come up and I'll replace all this with big lag bolts and washers, and that'll be fantastic. Okay, now to subdivide. Okay, so here I'm mocking up the engine framing, and this framing is set to reuse the engine cover that was on here before. No sense making a new one of those, although I'll have to make it 3 inches taller. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, there's a little more room to work on the engine than there was because, of course, the floor is 3.5 inches lower. It does mean that there'll be tons and tons of room if a smaller engine ever goes in here. Okay. Excellent. You can come out for a minute. Excellent. Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay, now it really gets serious. This is a very expensive sheet of 3/4 inch sapele mahogany plywood. And I think I can get the two side pieces out of a sink. Anyway, I'm just trying to figure that out. I hope. My calculations are right. That's one piece, and this is the other, giving us that much to allow for a curve because, of course, the side of the hull is curved. So let me go check if that's at least practical. Okay, so if I do a similar trick with the tape, I can see that pretty much the widest point is going to be about here, where I'm going to need an additional 3.5 inches. I don't think there was 7 inches there. Let's go check. Ooh, no, I don't believe so. 6. You know, at a certain point, fitting perfectly against the ribs is not as important as economizing the plywood like this. Yeah, definitely. Okay, wish me luck. And there we go. Holy mackerel. So let's see how this can work. I may have to do some starter cuts. Okay, let's see if I can slide this any more close into place. I can. Will you look at that? Okay, so I'm going to line these up here, and now it's going to be able to go that way 3/4 of an inch. So if I scribe 3/4 of an inch off of here, I know exactly where I'm going to be. Perfect. Okay, 3/4 of an inch here. Well, aside from that mess on the side, I'm actually feeling pretty good about it. Let's go to the other one. Okay, let's see if I can do this slightly more elegantly. Cool. Beauty. Perfect. Wow. Okay. This is pretty straightforward. Okay. Well, this is the engine cover for the Chevy 6-cylinder that's currently in the boat. And although I would love to do away with this and the Chevy 6-cylinder that's currently in the boat, they're here for a while at least. Those of you paying attention to the size of this and the engine itself and the recent 3D animation showing the galley basically here, well, yes, this end of the engine is going to be seriously underfoot while working at the galley, but that's a small compromise I think I can get around. What I need to do now is raise this an additional 3.5 inches to compensate for the sole dropping 3.5 inches so that it still fits over the engine, and remove this table base. All right. Easy enough. Might find use for that. Make this extension out of plain old spruce strapping. Okay, so now I'm going to attach these to the bottom with pocket screws. Remember pocket screws? Taller engine box. Should we go see if it fits? Looks like it fits. All right, that's excellent. Well, now I know how big this front section is going to be. And then here is the last piece. Ah, I love it. 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 Okay, so you may say, why this big hole here? Well, this is going to be a step actually down into the forecastle. And it's going to be quite a comfortable step, not necessarily as big as it is now because it'll have a frame of mahogany with a nosing on it to step down. But the door is also going to be quite large because I think I know what's going on in the forecastle, and it's going to be a semi social space. Anyway, it's kind of interesting, but this is all I need in plywood, and until this is gone, I won't need to cover up that spot right there. Wow, let's get some oil on this. Now that is definitely not clean enough to be a dust-free finished environment, but if you've been watching the show for any time at all, I always use tung oil as the very first coat. It just brings out that depth of color, and tung oil makes a fantastic tack rag. In other words, as I lay it on and then I wipe it down a bit, it takes all the dust with it. All right, so I'm going to try a slightly different technique. Instead of brushing it on, or using a cloth would be a lot in here, I'm going to squeegee it on. All I really need to do is spread it around. Even if there are slight imperfections, the rubbing will deal with that. The problem with brushing it on is that it goes on too thick and I can't actually, control it well enough, and you end up wasting so much oil. It's an experiment. Let's see how it goes. We'll start down in here. I'm not quite sure how far that will go with this squeezing technique. Oh, this is the ticket. Oh yeah. This is absolutely the way to do this. Man, I wish I'd discovered this years ago. Goodness, this is an awesome way to spread out tung oil. Oh my gosh. Last week I proposed a bit of an experiment around subscriptions on account of about half the people that watch the show don't actually subscribe. So I reached out and asked if some of those people might actually push the button, and well, they did. Over 300 people subscribed over the last week, which is over 10 times as many I get in a normal week. Plus, I do believe I can see at least a small blip in the increase in views, which means maybe the algorithm took notice. If you'd like to carry on with that, if you haven't yet subscribed, please hit it. I'd be very grateful. Thanks. Well, hello and welcome to the Travels with Geordie Beer of the Week, coming to you this week from the very cozy wheelhouse of MV Zephyrus. Let's get straight to the beer. I'm going back to Daggeran Brewery here in British Columbia, largely because last weekend was a bit of a disappointment, and I love this brewery, so I wanted to have another go. This is their Brun, which is a Belgian-style, Abbey-style double, and it's brewed with fig, and that sounds very interesting. So we'll see what we think of this. Well, I am so pleased to get that sole into Palm. I just can't imagine next week working on a flat surface and getting going on that forward bulkhead, and all kinds of stuff is going to go on relatively quickly, I do believe, and I'm very, very pleased with the way that went. Okay, Daggeran's Brun. Now that's a beer I can get into. It's not like a dark beer, but it's still a rich, warm, buttery. I can see that fig, but there's no flavor of fig. It's just sort of the warmth of it. You can just imagine it. Oh my gosh, that's yummy. Absolutely fantastic. All right, let's jump into some paperwork. Last week's winner of a Travels With Geordie t-shirt is Colin Hyde. Colin Hyde. Wow, imagine that. Colin Hyde. Get a hold of me, and we'll make sure you get your Travels With Geordie t-shirt. Off PayPal, a very kind donation from Eyes of Phil Art. Cheers. Thanks ever so much. I really appreciate that. And off the Amazon wish list, some neat stuff. Firstly, a windshield washer pump, which I'm very grateful for. This will be for my Land Rover, actually, because I've never had windshield washers on the Land Rover, and now that I'm commuting quite some distance weekly in the rain, it will be really nice to have windshield washers. So that's really kind, and it did not come with any indication who sent it, so if it was you, please get a hold of me. But cheers to you nonetheless. And another component for the heating system on Geordie. These are thermally activated switches. They're a tiny little component with 2 terminals on the backside, and they close at 55 degrees. And that's going to be used in conjunction with the timer I talked about last week, for managing whether or not the Webasto diesel furnace stays on after it does a cycle to heat the hot water. It's a little complex. We'll go into it in great detail as we start to install that, hopefully before this spring when I head out cruising. And again, that came without any indication of who sent it. So if it was you, please let me know. Cheers. And then a surprise box from Jeff Peacock. This is really neat. This is a steaming bag system. So what it consists of is a roll of polyethylene tube, a hole punch, which is used to punch holes in it for these. I've dropped it. I'll have to open up another one. Steam hose inserts, which he 3D printed. These are 3D printed. Some of them have threads on them to fit the very steamer he happened to notice I have. Jeff, this is crazy. I've actually never held a 3D printed object in my hand before. Anyway, very, very cool. So, and he gave me a full set of instructions how when you steam in a bag, it inflates the bag, you close it all up with the the clothespins, and it's very, very effective at steam bending because he was watching my efforts with the draped over bubble wrap. So I'm very, very grateful, Jeff. The next time I steam bend anything, it'll be a lot of fun playing with this setup. I really appreciate it. Thanks ever so much. Cheers. This really is yummy. All right then, all you need now is a word of the week, and I am just gonna jump right in with soul. Yes, it's been on my mind, and it's kind of fun to play with, isn't it? So, if you'd like to win a Travels with Geordie t-shirt, simply use the word soul and a comment down below, and I'll pick it random over the next couple of weeks. Why did I say that? Weeks worth of comments, and if I pick you, you'll have won a Travels with Geordie t-shirt. Cheers, see you next week. This boat is pretty crooked.